Okay, I'm gonna take two at this. I've already kind of gone through it before, so hopefully this will be a little bit more refined. I did actually just write so much in here that I guess I hit the max total, or I don't know. I got to the point where I couldn't keep adding information and I would have to make a second post. I hit submit reply and it disappeared, so that sucked. All right, so this is going to be a response to WaveWriter. I think we start on page 9 is what it is, but I have rehearsed this, so hopefully it's going to be a little bit faster now. WaveWriter first responds to something that I had said earlier here. He quotes me when I say this is a misrepresentation. So let's go to this initial post and look at this first. Shiny Trash Can states the issue arises when you look at the Q&A section of the summit where they state the popularity is a factor in balancing. Meanwhile, if ships aren't played, they'll get buffed until they are played enough. While popularity in itself is not a bad thing, I find this worrying as it addresses a symptom and not the underlying cause. So I responded to this. This is a misrepresentation, which is very likely aided by the dev not being a native English speaker. Wargaming was never going to decide that some arbitrary number of CV players was more important than the health of the game. Never. I did a video about the 2019 summit where I did a translation/contextualization of the summit, though I stopped at the Q&A section because chat wanted to see gameplay. This is about 2 hours long. It covers about 45 minutes of the presentation, so there's about an hour and 15 minutes of me. And this is going to cover... Yay, sneeze. This is going to cover the majority of what they're presenting, which is a lot. However, a lot of the misinterpretation actually comes from the Q&A section, which I had not done at that time. And later over the course of conversation, basically people wanted to see the Q&A thing. So I went ahead and said, hey, you can watch me stream it in 20 minutes. I'll do it real quick because I had woken up at 5:30 in the morning. So I was awake. Unfortunately, the Q&A section video is a little rambly, but it does hit the high points. It hits the points that need to be hit, I think. So, although I am open to redoing it if people voiced concern, but I haven't heard anything as of yet. So I'm quoted. The response is, not sure that is entirely true, as he literally makes a statement about rolling out a quick patch. Actually says hotfix, straight after talking about if numbers will go down after a change. He also states that in the end, if the numbers aren't considered acceptable, then what was the point? The point being the reference to the resource they put into the change. There's actually more context to this as well. I know they will not do anything to make CVs popular enough to reach the numbers they want/need to call CVs a success, but the video does suggest they will skirt the edges of acceptability and maybe step over, to make them the success they need them to be. This is extremely relevant as to why I made the videos in the first place. This is what I call the fear. When people saw the video, when CC's reacted to the video, when Flammo put out his video, if you look for Flammo 2019, I think I pulled it up earlier and I don't want to waste time, but if you look for Flammo's video on this, I think it's actually not too far ago. I had to find it when I was talking about this earlier. CV imbalance is not an accident. He literally makes a video talking about they're going to balance on popularity. Holy shit, that was scary. That was really terrifying. He literally makes a video based on saying that they're going to balance around popularity, which is just not true. They actually have a slide earlier in the presentation which goes over why the hell they did this in the first place. One, detachment from the main game experience and low class popularity. It's a part of one of the value points on this list. Low value of AA builds. Small thing, but it's noticeable. If you're going to spec for AA, you want it to matter. If you don't see CVs, it's not going to matter. Skill dependence and gap. This was actually very relevant. They go over this at length in the presentation. Absolutely relevant, because you could have people that could simply dominate the game because they happen to be good in a CV. And you had people that could absolutely do nothing in the game because they were not amazing in a CV. Excessive battle influence. This is also gone over at length, which is something around here, I think it is. Yeah, where if we look at what this graph is telling us, the battle influence is literally off the chart. It has no basis in reality connected to these other things. This is pulled from like damage, potential damage, capping, cap resets, all sorts of different information that they've pulled together to try to figure out what the class is adding to the battle. DD being a little less than where the CV is, but prior to the rework, this was not even in a ballpark. Like, this was completely different. It had to be changed. It's not just about, well, we wanted to have more popularity. It's all of this. It's the whole package of this. So when you take an off-the-cuff response in a Q&A section, it's going to be different. There is a part where, in the course of our exchange, it's like, well, if he made a statement in this and he hasn't gone and retracted it, well, doesn't that mean that the statement stands? Well, you also have to look at the fact that during the presentation, they had a presentation, and that flowed pretty well. When it got to the Q&A section is where things got a little more confused. People, the topic gets handed from one dev to another dev. It's more off-the-cuff responses. And I think in a later post, which in the effort of trying to keep this video compact, I'm not going to try to go through everything. It was like, well, why didn't it get changed or redacted? In general, Wargaming's response to this summit being treated the way that it was by community contributors and the community at large was, wow, we're never going to do this again. We're never going to put out information that people are just going to twist and stab us with. Like, what the summit was a good faith effort to bring in a bunch of community contributors and have a talk with them about what's going on, what they're trying to do, where they're hoping to get to. And instead, people took this graph or that graph, came up with a flippant term called the spreadsheet, and have used these numbers in a way to make Wargaming feel or seem like they're not concerned with the play experience. They're willing to balance off of some arbitrary popularity number, and that they're willing to skirt the edges of acceptability and maybe step over. To me, this sentence, this right here, represents the fear. When people saw that, this is what they were worried about happening, and yet it's not what happened. I went through and talked about in patch 8.5, they increased AA, and it was a monumental change. It was absolutely devastatingly huge. It was the difference between your 9 planes going in near a Worcester and not losing a plane for 6 to 7 seconds before starting that plane loss, and going near a Worcester, and in 6 to 7 seconds, you've lost 6 to 7 planes or all of them. It's an extreme amount of difference. Like overnight, you went from not losing stuff to it's all dead. Like, there were some people that couldn't even bridge the gap on this. And they did execute a hotfix. They altered a commander skill called Survivability Expert to go from plus 15 health up to plus 25 health. They added 10 health per tier. A Worcester did in that case, a Minotaur did in that case like 16 to 1700 damage per second. And they gave planes an additional 100 damage or 100 health per plane at tier 10. Congratulations, that bought them another half a second. Maybe, in terms of like losing the 6 planes, by the way, because 6 planes together is 600 health. So that's about a third of a second in terms of what the Minotaur could do. I was actually kind of proud of the thing that I wrote in the response, which is like, that's not pissing on the fire. That's pissing in the general direction of the blaze and wondering if the wind is going to blow some of the urine on top of it. Like, there's nothing magical about this. But that was the hotfix. Is that hotfix representative of skirting the edges of acceptability and maybe stepping over? No, it's not terrifying. It's not bad. They didn't do that. So there's going to be some back and forth on this. And also, there's a valid point in here. I think it's dangerous to say, hey, this is a misinterpretation. You should trust me. I understand things that other people don't understand. I get that. I really do. But there is a post in here where I try to call attention as to why I think that. So I did respond with one, hey, I made a video regarding the Q&A section. So here it is if you want to watch it. But this is literally my response is, this is why I call attention to this video, because it's extremely easy for a native English speaker to hear what you're describing, meaning this, the fear. But it's not what he meant. In terms of a hotfix, they actually did something like that, and I'm talking about the Survivability Expert thing for patch 8.5. Like, this was the hotfix. That's not, there's no fear there. There's no going overboard to somehow rescue the population dive that happened in 8.5. They literally spent, I think, 2, maybe 3 months before patch 8.7 came out where they brought AA levels down. 8.5, they instituted a new way of doing AA. It's a different system. So they had to alter the system to try to balance it and keep it in perspective, and 8.7 largely did that. They haven't really messed with it since, although they have started releasing ships that have better AA systems, but worse guns or worse handling or worse health or something to try to make sure that they're still balanced, because they have an extreme amount of influence in AA, but they have less in the other traits. The response to this was, so the big question is, how is it that you seem to believe you can decipher what this non-native English-speaking person is saying, and yet others are wrong? That statement in itself makes no sense. You're literally saying you don't understand him because he's a non-native English-speaking, but I can. It's not that he's non-native English-speaking. It's that the fact that he's not a native English speaker is going to lead to situations where you can have mistranslation. So you need to understand what the intent of the design is that he's pulling his information off of to deliver to the people in the room. So it's not studying the words that he said, it's studying the actual design that he's commenting on. It's like if a mechanic is talking to you about a car, if you know the design of the car and you are a mechanic, then you don't need to listen to the actual specific words the mechanic used. You need to understand what the concept is he's trying to relay, because you have the background information, which I end up responding with in this post, but we can get there in a second. All of this, all of it, I literally respond to at length in the videos that I posted. All of it. It's all put into context. It's all put into an understandable fashion. So it's like to restate all this just seems frustrating because I've already stated it. I realize it's not in forum format, but I was thinking maybe I could take clips from the video so that it's more forum friendly, but even still it's going to take a lot of time, and people, I mean, if they didn't watch the video in the first place, then they're probably not going to put time into watching the clips. So I'm unsure why you don't feel that a major point that Wargaming were making during this video is that they invested a lot of resources into the CV rework, and they need the player base numbers to either stay at that current level of popularity or get better. Otherwise, what is the point? What changes were talked about when they again indicated that if numbers dropped, they would buff? Why? Because they need them to remain at the level of popularity that pays back the investment made. This is an excellent conclusion to make off of a small piece of information, but it is not supported by the whole of the information. Again, there is this, which literally tells you why they did what they did, and popularity is a small part of it. The answer that was given was an off-the-cuff answer in a Q&A section where you're basically, somebody asks you a question, you're trying to riff and talk about kind of what's going on in the back end. Yes, you could consider it a failure if nobody plays the damn class, if it goes extinct. Sure, why did you spend so much time? But even still, with as many issues as this class had, reworking it helped the game. To the point where if they'd removed the carrier, they would have removed an outlier that might have helped the game more than leaving it in the RTS system that it was in. The rework was necessary from a game design, balance, health standpoint, and needed to occur. Popularity is just kind of like a fringe benefit to that. My response was, so as a joke, Greta Thunberg once referred to her Asperger's as a superpower. Am I telling you that I'm the best person in the world? No. There are multiple times where you respond like, well, why don't you just use your superpower? I'm sorry, but I'm taking that as a slight. Pretty much every time you said it, that wasn't very cool. But for me, I'm constantly plagued by saying X but intending Y. Like, this is the legit reality of me. I'll say something that the words, when constructed in the way that they are, could mean X, but when you have somebody that takes words in context of how people use them in standard English, they don't mean X. They mean something completely else. So I get to completely try to pull back and rephrase stuff. I do this a lot. So am I able to empathize with somebody else that has a similar issue? Yes, because I literally have that same issue in that exact same way where there's translation errors. So sure, when I see this And I have context because I study game design, and I literally spend time looking at the design of how CVs are constructed, implemented into the game, because it's what I do, it's what I comment on. Then yes, I'm going to put the two and two together. He stated something that didn't come across very well, and I know the design he's pulling from, so I feel I can comment on it. And then lastly, my assessment has borne out. This was recorded 2 years ago. Wargaming has done a lot of stuff in the time since. It has fit with my assessment. The concept of the fear, well, they might go to the bare, like, skim. I'll go back and I'll look at it specifically if I can. Because I know that's been an issue in the past. Let me just get rid of that. Because I don't want to misquote, so I'll pull directly. I know that they'll not do anything, meaning like just go completely crazy to make CV popular enough to reach the numbers they want or need to call CVs a success, but the video does suggest they will skirt the edges of acceptability and maybe step over, ? To make them the success they need them to be. They've never done that. Never. From patch 8.5 all the way till now, they have not. You might have some outliers, like a Razor might say, well, patch 8.7 pulled back AA too much, now it's too weak, now it's too this, now it's too that. I personally see it as fairly balanced because if you have ships working together, they can decimate planes. If you don't agree me, look at some high-end clan battles. They murder planes, and that's just two ships using stuff together in concert, or positioning in such a way that there's not a good way in to be able to interact with the enemy ships. This is something that's already in the game. Even with the patch 8.7 adjustments, it's still perfectly viable. It's more than capable of killing damn planes. Plus, they made it even easier to kill planes with the commander rework, buffing what cruisers have in the form of anti-air. This is going to go further with this. I think I talk about the numbers have dropped, and by all accounts, they haven't buffed carriers to some unreasonable, obnoxiously bizarre level. And then we start going back and forth, and I don't think it gets extremely constructive after this point. So I'm not going to continue. I think that kind of hits the core of it, but if you do have additional questions, I can try to respond to those. But I mean, I gave a lot of information in probably a 10-minute video because there's just so much to write that it's easier to just talk.